Brilliance Audio.
Follow Me to the Edge by Tariq Ashkanani. Performed by Aaron Shedlock. May 1993. The blood wasn't going to come off easily. It had long since dried. The water was cold, which didn't help. Empty soap dispensers, too. It made Joe think of high school bathrooms. Kids who used the mirrors to wipe their fingers dry, who wouldn't bother washing their hands after a piss, even if there was soap. That had been all Joe could think about on the ride over here. Getting clean. Sitting in the back of a cruiser, gliding along that straight, narrow highway in the dark. At some point, it had started to rain. Heavy enough to dull the sounds of the road, to have the wipers on full. Joe had watched the droplets race along his window, his bloodied hands in his lap. They'd trembled all the way back to Cooper. The icy water came off his skin rust-tinged. Progress of a kind, he supposed. He scratched at his fingers, digging at the clumps that had collected between his knuckles. The blood had splashed across his chest and down his legs. It was in his shoes. The mirror in the bathroom was cracked. Shattered glass that sent 1,000 of him back. Pale-faced, and with the right side of his blonde hair matted with red. He must have run his hand through it. Afterward, maybe, while they'd waited by the side of the road, as the air cooled and the dusk settled. Together, the dead and the dying, and Joe and the boy. And now his chest shook, and his hair was slick with another man's blood. The detective at the door cleared his throat, tossed him a towel. Joe took it, dried himself. When he was done, the white material was red, and the detective pointed at the laundry hamper in the corner. The guy had been his shadow ever since they'd picked Joe up at the scene. 3 hours in a little room with nothing but a plastic cup and a growing urge to piss. Said his name was Fields. Said it like him and Joe had never met before, only they had. A bunch of times. Detectives never did pay much attention to lowly patrol officers. Joe had told his story 4 times now, to 4 different people. People who nodded sympathetically and scribbled notes. People who got him coffees and offered him cigarettes, offered him reassurances. That it had been a clean shooting, that ballistics would back up his story. They'd taken his gun away. One of our own, they kept saying. They meant Frank, his partner. The guy who had just taken a face full of buckshot during a routine traffic stop. Joe hadn't even thought. He'd just pulled his Smith & Wesson and returned fire. Come on, Fields said, pushing open the restroom door. Weather's bad. I'll give you a ride home. But Joe didn't want to go home. Didn't want to try to sleep. He knew what he'd seen when he closed his eyes. Hell, he could see with them open. The red Buick pulled over to the highway's dusty shoulder ahead of them, its hazards flashing. The gleam of silver as Frank tossed the dime to decide who would approach. Frank's laugh as it landed. Your lucky day. His last words. No, Joe wasn't going home. He got a ride to the hospital instead. The waiting room was filled with the usual Friday night clientele. Guys in football jerseys, chanting, leering at a woman passed out in the corner. Bar fights and drunken falls. Overdoses, people covered in vomit, holding their broken arms, holding each other. Joe pushed past a couple of hookers who catcalled him, calling him baby and sugar. They were flying, their faces busted. A drunk clutched a bloody towel in his hands and lay across 3 seats, crying quietly. Joe spotted a single nurse trying to keep order. She brandished a clipboard like it was a shield. Joe reached the edge of the throng and didn't stop. Through double doors and into a long corridor. Someone called after him. That nurse, maybe. But he kept going. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum floor. He was jumpy, his heart staccato. Every cry from a patient's bed was that kid howling from the back seat of the Buick. Every door slam was buckshot. Maybe he'd been wrong to come here. He knew where he was going. He barely glanced at the signs, the muscle memory still fresh. Half a childhood spent here with his brother, then 5 years as a Cooper cop to fill in any gaps. He'd gotten to know the hospital all too well. He dodged an orderly with a cart, barreled through another set of double doors and up 2 flights of stairs. Emergency surgery.